Welcome back. As the title of this video says, 7 years at Prime. Anniversary date was actually yesterday for my 7th year at Prime, and went back as I went back and watched my 6th year video because that's what I apparently do. Because I mentioned in that video that I went back and watched my 5th year video. But what I like to do, especially for those that haven't ever watched, you might come across this and wonder what's this guy's story, is just do a quick recap. How I chose Prime, what I was doing before Prime, how I lasted 7 years, what's the background, and just kind of quickly go over that. I'm going to try to do it a little quicker than I've done it in the past. I grew up in the Chicago area, went to college in Michigan. College was not really my thing. Left college and worked in radio for 17 years. 2008, I stopped getting raises in radio. That's the great housing collapse. There were all sorts of financial whatever, and just was one of those where industry couldn't keep up. We were able to maintain what we had, and I needed to seek other sources of income because, even though I was getting paid the same amount, health insurance kept going up, cost of living kept going up for, I think it was, well, it ended up being 5 years because it was 2013 that I ended up leaving. But in the interim, for the last 3 years that I was in radio, I picked up two other jobs. So I was working 3 jobs. It started with learning to drive school bus. So I worked in radio and I worked doing sports on the radio. So the natural thought was, I could drive these teams. I was announcing games. It was high school sports mostly, a little bit of college stuff. And I thought, well, I could drive the charter bus, announce the game, drive the charter bus back, and so I could make a little extra money that way. Charter bus company wouldn't hire me without having a CDL, so I got a job with the local school district because, as I'm sure in the current situation, you've probably seen a lot of school districts will train you to get your CDL. Worked that for a year, and then the charter bus company, with a year of bus driving under my belt, hired me. So I was working radio, school bus, charter bus, and a lot of times I would work, a morning school bus route, drive the charter bus, for a team to a game, announce the game, drive the charter bus home. So you're talking about a 7:30 game. There's a JV game, a varsity game, so we probably leave at 3 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So I was up for like a 5 o'clock bus route, drive at 2 o'clock in the afternoon to a junior varsity game at 5, a 7:30 varsity game, and then we're done by 9:30, whatever time, 10 o'clock, drive home a couple hours, and then wake up the next morning, get home at midnight, 1 o'clock, get up the next morning and do it again. That was a bit much for me. So, like I said, I ended up doing that for a few years and decided this just isn't working out. My wife got an opportunity. We lived in Minnesota at the time. We moved to Michigan. And I did a little bit of charter bus driving, but I got a job in public transit, driving the city bus. And after a year and a half of that, it was December, probably November of 2014, I made the decision to come to Prime and or to leave that and come to trucking. So between November and December, I made a decision, to apply and to come to Prime, and I began in January. So you say, well, it's February, and my official anniversary date is February 12th. So I came to Prime in January. I think it was January 6th was my orientation date. Prime counts your hire date, and I'm an independent contractor. I'll talk about that in a moment. I'm not a Prime employee officially, but they still have an anniversary date for you as the date you get your CDL. When I went through the program, it was round about a month. So you have a week of orientation, then it was about a month of the Prime Student Driver, PSD program. It's a little bit shorter now. So it probably wouldn't take you that long if you came through now, although I do want to touch on that because there are changes in this. I want to talk about my experience first, and then I'll mention that, there are some changes right now. But so I did that, got my CDL, I trifected, passed all 3 portions, the pre-trip, the backing, and the driving, all on my first try. Went through the trainer and trainee, TNT phase, the over-the-road, your on-the-job training part. Did it all in a tanker truck. I've been in tanker since day one. I did my prime student driver in a tank truck, did my TNT in a tank truck, and then immediately when I got my truck, which was the beginning of May of 2015, started doing this regional dedicated. I do a regional dedicated for Prime out of Decatur, Indiana. I still lived in Michigan when I started this for the first 2 months. Got home probably every 2 to 3 to 4 weeks. It was very difficult going home. I lived actually in Traverse City, Michigan at that time. If you're at all familiar with geography, probably the closest we delivered is Grand Rapids, Michigan, and then it's another 2.5 hours north of there. So I did a lot of deadheading and then had to deadhead all the way back from there to Decatur, Indiana. So a lot of my off time was taken driving after delivery to home and then from home to get back to the terminal. So after 2 months, my wife and I said, you know what, if we move to Decatur, I can be home. At that time, probably would only have to sleep in the truck a couple times a week and home every weekend, that sort of situation. And so that's what we did. And it was 3 months later, we rented a house halfway between Decatur and Fort Wayne, Indiana. If you don't know where Decatur is, it's about 20 miles south east of Fort Wayne, Indiana. And I have been in that area ever since. We bought a house a little more than 1.5 years ago. So we've lived in 2 different places there. And that's the trying to be condensed story of from before coming to Prime to today. The next part that I like to talk about is that experience is different than what they're doing right now. There is such a demand, and there's a new training requirement in the Prime Student Driver program. This is a federal change to training. And Prime doesn't have enough trainers right now, is the bottom line. So they are struggling. They're only bringing in a very small number of students for the time being, and this is a very time-sensitive situation where they're not bringing in a ton of trainees right now, or students. So if you're interested in coming, please make sure you have your ducks in a row and talk with recruiting, because I know I've heard stories of people who were all set to come and were then, after they've already quit their job and whatnot, we're told you're going to have to wait because we don't have enough trainers right now. So make sure you're in constant communication with recruiting if you're interested in coming to Prime. So that's the first thing. The second thing, like I said, training is a little bit shorter right now than it was, as far as the PSD part, than it was when I went through. So I'm telling you my story. Current situation is going to be a little bit different than it was at that point. I do want to talk about, I've been here 7 years. I must like it, right? So I do want to talk about that. It's like any job. There are good days and there are bad days. There's no doubt about that. I don't want to paint this picture that this is the greatest thing since sliced bread and you're never going to have a problem. What I like to tell people is 99% of the time when I am frustrated, when I'm upset about something, it's not a Prime topic. It's a customer has ordered oil and then they don't have room for it. Those are the things that I get frustrated about. And it's like, well, why didn't you send anybody an email and say, we're not going to be able to take that for, another 10 hours, something along those lines. So those are the things that I tend to get upset about. They're not Prime related. And like I said, that's probably 95% of the time. There's the occasional thing where it is a Prime, but that's any job. Like I said, you find a job where it's just a delight to show up to work every single day. You hang on to that because that is so worth, maybe even not making as much money as as you thought. But then there's the flip side, is the money. And I know I've talked about money a lot in some of my videos. I haven't done one of those how much money can you make videos in quite some time, to be honest. But I know the first video that I made was, I want to say $56,000 for the first year that I had my truck. I will tell you that every year I have made incrementally more money. So you can't argue with that. I mean, if money goes down, that's a problem. But if you're starting to make more money, then obviously you're keeping up with inflation and potentially getting a raise, and that's certainly the case. And I will tell you that in 2021, I mean, I'm sure you folks, if you're watching this, have paid attention to the state of the supply chain in this country. There is an incredible demand. As a result, freight is, it pays well right now. And 2021 was by and large, and by a wide margin, the best year that I've had at Prime financially. Like I said, were there some hiccups along the way? Were there some issues? That's that's trucking. Were there situations where, there's a time around Christmas where I showed up to a customer for what I was told was a 9 a.m. appointment. Got there and they said, we weren't expecting you until 8 p.m. And then they didn't have room in their tank until the next day at 4 p.m. So 28 hours where they didn't have room in their tank. Now, you get compensated for that. That's the positive of it. From a person who likes to go home every day, it's frustrating and you just want to get out of there. But you're being compensated for that fairly. So, as long as you do your job, as long as you show up on time, pick up, deliver on time, then, you can... I don't have a lot to complain about as far as I don't like to sleep in my truck, but if I'm going to be compensated and it's one of those, it is what it is, then I'm going to sleep in my truck. I mentioned at the onset of this, when I was talking about starting and moving to near Decatur, that I thought I could sleep in the truck maybe twice a week. Well, at this point, if I sleep in the truck once a month, that's a lot. I mean, I probably slept in my truck 5-6 times in 2021 total. Really the one big time is our spring, the customer that we're dedicated to in Decatur usually shuts down. And when I say shuts down, limits their production greatly once a year for annual maintenance, cleaning, that sort of thing. They typically have they typically have some freight. And the last probably 2 years, I've been able to continue running and not have to go out on the road. There are years that I've had to go and do a week of over the road. And I expect that. And honestly, I expect that I'll have to do a week of over the road that week. And if I'm told I can stay local, then I'm happy. But again, for the most part, I cannot complain, because most drivers for Prime, I would say 99.9% of drivers for Prime do not go home every day like I do. So for me to complain about 6 days a year sleeping in this truck, it's silly. So most money I've ever made, customers really being the issue as far as a lot of the complaints. I would obviously recommend Prime. I still think they have one of the best training programs, if not the best training program in the trucking industry. Like I said, the slowdown, the issue with training right now, all I can say is stay in contact with recruiting. If you're looking to come to Prime and you already have your CDL, that's a bit of a different story, because you don't have to worry about the training aspect of it. But if you are looking to come and get your CDL, be in constant contact. Get a recruiter that you can go back and forth with. Get either a cell phone number or an email that you can get back and forth and say, well, when, can I put on a wait, something. I don't know how that all works, but that's what I would highly recommend. But Prime in general, as I like to say, I wouldn't be here 7 years later if it weren't for the way the company is. I spent 3 years on the driver advisory board. That time is over. I feel like we made changes that make this a better company, or helped make changes that make this a better company. I think the company wants to make this a better company, is always trying. Doesn't mean they're perfect. It doesn't mean they're going to do everything that they think you should do, but they're making an effort and they're listening. So I would recommend it. So that's my 7-year video. Kind of crazy, you know. I was one of those drivers who said, I'm going to get my year experience. I'm going to find something bigger and better. And I found the bigger and better with the regional dedicated, because if I were over the road, I honestly don't think I would still be at Prime. But that is not a knock on Prime. That's a personal preference that as I like to say, I like my wife, I like my family, I like to go home at the end of every day. If that's not important to you and you want to do over the road, I would recommend Prime if that's your priority. My priority is to get home at the end of every single day. And doing what I do, it works out very well. Thanks for watching. If you are interested in coming to Prime, I still will have that link in the description to the application. If you have any questions, you can comment below, or that email address is down there as well. Thanks so much for watching. Appreciate it, and we will talk to you next time.